Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we're going to be going over the biggest changes coming in patch 9.18 according to Riot Games, and there's quite a few things to go over. So as usual, if you end up enjoying this video, then don't forget to hit that like button, but let's not waste any more time and let's just jump right into it. So starting things off, let's talk about the nerfs coming over in patch 9.18. First we have Aatrox. Now Aatrox is known to be one of the stronger top laners and even mid laners, honestly even junglers at this point in the game at the moment, because he just heals way too much. So as of course is tradition, his passive healing is going to be reduced. It is now going to be at 25% against minions compared to what I believe it is now being 100%. Following that, we also have his R movement speed being reduced across the board. It's actually reduced by 30% at rank 1, and by the time you get it to the final rank, it's reduced by 50%, which is pretty impactful. So this will definitely hurt Aatrox for sure. Moving along, we have a nerf coming over to a champion I'm sure a lot of people are going to be happy about, and it's going to be Akali. Now, ever since Akali got reworked, this champion has been an absolute headache for everyone, whether it's the people playing against her, whether it's the riders trying to finally just actually balance her and make her quote-unquote fair. It appears that they are not done just yet, because there are even more nerfs coming over for this champion, for this assassin, and they are as follows. Her ultimate, the first part of it, no longer stuns. I mean, that in itself is actually quite big, because not only is the stun just good for obvious reasons, just to set up the play and everything, right? But you can no longer actually cancel any certain abilities or stop someone from maybe trying to escape, etc. But it doesn't end there just yet, because as we move on to her second ultimate, you can see here that the damage is heavily being decreased at rank 1 by 50, 30 by rank 2, and it's the same by rank 3. And as if that wasn't enough, her ultimate cooldown is also being increased at the earlier ranks by rank 1. I mean, it's an extra 40 seconds. That's a lot. So this in itself is of course a pretty big nerf for Akali. I mean, whether it's going to be finally enough to put the nail in the coffin and make her quote-unquote fair, or at least I guess not as obnoxious to face as most people would say it, is the question. But I think this is probably a pretty big nerf. Moving along, we also have a nerf coming over to Xayah, one of the strongest AD carries at the very moment, where her armor is being decreased by 3 and her ultimate cooldown is also being increased by 20 seconds across the board. Now, the nerf to her ultimate honestly feels like a little bit of a slap on the wrist. I don't think that's that bad, I guess. I mean, 20 seconds, you know, it's not horrible, right? But her armor being decreased by 3 actually does make her much weaker in the laning phase, because now she's much more susceptible to damage, so she has to be playing a little bit smarter, because now if she takes a trade, or at least a bad trade, well, she's going to be taking a lot more damage from the enemy AD carry and even any supports that are of course AD damage, like for instance maybe someone like maybe a Thresh or maybe a Pike. All in all, at the end of the day, I feel like it is slightly kind of like a slap on the wrist. I mean, yeah, it's a nerf, and yeah, it's a decent one, but it's not going to be just something that completely changes the meta down in the bot lane, and you can probably still play Xayah and find success quite easily. But moving along, we also have another nerf coming over to the other AD carry that's extremely popular and of course very strong, Kai'Sa. Now this is truly a slap on the wrist. Her E ability's attack speed bonus has been decreased, so by the time you get it to max rank, it's now 60% as opposed to 80%, but it's the same at rank 1. Now, most people of course do max their E ability second, when I mean, you could probably still do that. I mean, it's probably still just as good. 20% by the final level really isn't all that much. I mean, she's still using it for utility, she still goes invisible, she's still very hard to kill, she's still gonna have a lot of attack speed. It's just maybe now, just maybe, people might start maxing W second instead, but even then, I still doubt it. And the final nerf of this patch is going to be coming over to our boy Nunu, the champion that everyone, almost everyone at least, agrees is the jungler to play if you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, or if you just want some free wins. This champion is way too strong for how easy he is to play, so the nerfs are as follows. The health per level is being decreased by 8, which is not too bad. The armor per level is being decreased by 0.5, which is also okay, because it'll also make his jungle clear slightly worse, but at the end of the day, it's still Nunu. It's probably not that much worse at all. They are reducing his, I'm assuming, base mana by 3.56. I mean, I don't even know why that's in there. And his mana regeneration is also being decreased by 0.44. And the slow offered by his E ability is being decreased at rank 1 to being now 30% rather than 50%. But as you get it up to the final rank, it's going to be the exact same percentage. So it doesn't look like it's that big of a nerf if you just look at it individually. But I mean, putting it together, he did just lose quite a bit of base stats and stats per level, which again, combined together, is somewhat substantial, but I honestly don't even think it's going to affect him that much. And I say that because, well, one of those nerfs is his mana got decreased by 3. I mean, does that even do anything? I honestly don't know. Probably not the nerf most junglers were looking for that just hate facing Nunu, but I mean, maybe it's enough and maybe Riot knows something that we do not. But now that we got the nerf stuff out of the way, let's move on to the champions that are getting buffed, starting off with Caitlyn, which I have to say I am absolutely shocked. She is getting an increase in 2 AD for her base AD. Why? I don't really know. I think the champion is actually quite good at the moment. I think buffing her even further is going to make her pretty much no reason to pick anything else. So yeah, next patch, Caitlyn is a champion you might want to watch out for if you play the bot lane. Next up, we have Aurelion Sol, where his base HP is being increased by 65. Now that's actually quite a bit. I mean, that's essentially like a full auto attack and a half. Probably even like a spell for most champions, at least very, very early on into the game. So that's actually more than you would think, right? Because it also helps Aurelion Sol get those early trades in more successfully. So overall, a fairly decent buff coming over for Aurelion Sol. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Evelynn, and this is not a champion I'm excited to see in the meta. The champion is just very, very annoying to face because she is literally always invisible, but the buff is as follows. Her R damage multiplier versus low health targets is now changed from being 100% to 140%. I mean, that is a substantial increase in how much extra damage she is going to be doing. So yeah, Evelynn next patch, I have to say, whew, that's quite a hefty buff. I think the champion is perfectly fine the way she is. Personally, I'm a little bit worried. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit worried. Following that, we have a buff coming over to Lee Sin, who actually I could see deserving a buff. I mean, the champion is very feast or famine. So with that being said, the buff is as follows. His base HP is being increased by about 5. His base AD is being increased by about 1. And his R damage is also being increased by 25 across the board. Not substantial buffs, right? Nothing completely crazy, but it is Lee Sin, right? It's a very aggressive champion, a very strong champion if you play correctly, or if the champion is too overtuned. So you have to tread very, very carefully, and I think Riot is doing a pretty good job of that here by giving him some light buffs, enough to maybe make him a little bit more enticing, but hopefully not too much to where he's just completely overpowered. Following the Lee Sin buffs, we have buffs coming over to one of the most dreaded champions in League of Legends, Zoe. Her passive damage is being increased across the board. Of course, it scales off of your champion level, don't forget, but level 1, it's now going to be 16 as opposed to level 10, and by the final level, it'll now be 130 as opposed to 124. Now, don't forget, I mean, this is her passive, right? You use that thing pretty often. So even though it's only just a few extra damage, you're using it substantially, right? Like you're using it every single combo almost, so it adds up. But with that being said, it doesn't seem like it's a complete overbuff, but you really never know with this champion. Moving along, we have a buff coming over to our boy Echo. This guy has been getting buff after buff after buff after buff, and there is another one in store for him where his mana cost has been changed to being lowered by 20. On top of that, his stun on his W has been increased by an extra 0.5. Now that doesn't sound like it's a lot, but trust me, 0.5 seconds of a stun duration of a CC in a team fight, in just like an assassin duel or whatever, is a lot of time. 0.5 seconds in a team fight is so much more time than you could ever imagine, right? So these are some pretty good buffs coming over to Echo, considering he just got buffs like a few patches already in a row almost. So yeah, this is a champion you might want to watch out for in the next patch for sure. Next up, some quick buffs coming over to our boy Teemo, where his ultimate, the shrooms, no longer trigger on inactive scuttle, which I mean, I guess is kind of helpful. And his R ammo has been increased from 3 to now being 3 to 5. So as you rank it up, it goes from 3, 4, and then rank 3, it's a 5 ammo Teemo shroom. So you can store up to 5 shrooms as opposed to consistently being stuck at 3, which is actually a pretty big buff in my opinion. Moving along, we have some quick buffs coming over to Jhin, where his base AD is also being increased by 2. Now that's also a pretty good buff for Jhin. I think he's going to be very happy with that, and if you're a Jhin main, I think you should definitely be very happy with that buff without question. We also have some buffs coming over to Miss Fortune. It seems like Riot is trying to kind of switch the meta of the AD carry role, right? Where her buff is going to be for her E ability. The slow has been increased very slightly, 12% at rank 1, but by the time you get it to the final rank being rank 5, it's the same 60%. That's actually a really good buff because, I mean, you can just max your E ability last if you really want to. That's a 1-point wonder in my opinion. I mean, 40% at rank 1 is a hefty amount of slow. So yeah, sounds like a nice 1-point wonder, max Q and W instead. But even with that being said, you can still max your E ability second and you still have that 40% for the majority of your laning phase, which is still very good. Next up, we also have some pretty decently large changes coming over to Annie, where her E ability will now grant her 25% plus a 1.5% per champion level scaling movement speed, which which decays over a second and a half, which is actually pretty damn strong because now she can use her E ability to engage essentially, right? Because she can use that, get that extra movement speed, run up, proto belt, and pop that ultimate. Now to make her E ability not completely overtuned, the damage reduction has been lowered across the board, and her E ability's cooldown has actually been increased very slightly, but I think it's a pretty worthy trade-off. And the last buff coming over this patch is going to be towards Warwick, where it's a small buff, but it states the following. His W always grants attack speed against the hunted target, which is actually quite good. Moving along, we also have some quick new skins coming out where we have Star Guardian Nico, we have Star Guardian Nico Prestige Edition, we have Star Guardian Rakan and Xayah, which are the legendaries, and of course we have Star Guardian Zoe as well. And I'm also going to very quickly touch on some TFT changes as well. Now there's a bunch of new items coming for TFT where the TLDR is as follows. You have one new item component being the sparring glove, you have 8 new items made from that component, which is of course the sparring glove, right? Plus Infinity Edge, you have Sword of Divine being removed, and 2 new items created from the old Infinity Edge and the old Sword of the Divine recipes. Now, the items are as follows. We have something called the Thief's Gloves, we have Hand of Justice, we have a new Infinity Edge, we have Arcane Gauntlet, Quicksilver, Iceborne Gauntlet, Backhand, a repeating crossbow, Mittens, Lord's Edge, and the Last Whisper. Now, I don't want to go over these too much because I don't really talk about TFT too much, right? That's not the purpose here. But one of these items I think is very interesting, being the Thief's Gloves, where a champion holding this item can't hold any other items except temporary ones gained by this item. And the way it works is whenever a round starts, you gain 2 temporary items, which I think is actually super interesting. And I think it's going to make things a lot more fun, but also a lot more RNG. But either way, guys, that is it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of changes already in plan for the next patch. Let me know what you think about them down below. Let me know what you think about the Akali NERFS as well. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, of course, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.